Hi, my name is Jeff Harms, the Education Manager here at the Oregon Coast Aquarium. I'm here to lead you on a virtual behind-the-scenes tour. We're going to go behind different areas and talk about how we care for the mammals that live in those spaces. Before we do, I want to talk just briefly about a history of our aquarium here. We opened in 1992, and our theme is the Oregon Coast. So we focus on Oregon Coast animals. So most of the animals you see when you're walking through here are animals you could see if you were walking along the beach or in the forest. We do have two exceptions to that rule. We have a changing exhibit that changes every 2 years. Right now it's currently our sea punk exhibit. And we also have a new Indo-Pacific coral reef exhibit as well. So those are animals that you would see in the Pacific, but they would be in more tropical areas. So those are kind of the exceptions to the rule. But for the most part, the animals that you see here are all native to the Oregon coast, including the plants that we have too. So if you're interested in our plants, they are all native here to the Oregon coast, and most of them are labeled. So if you'd like to walk down our nature trail, you could check out all of the plants and see which ones you recognize. And obviously we do have a lot of Oregon coast animals here as well. A lot of the animals that we have are non-releasable, which means they're here because they needed a home. So they could either have an injury, or they could have been born in another facility and not been able to be released. So all of our marine mammals currently are non-releasable, as well as a lot of our birds. We do collect some animals, so we have permits to collect animals like invertebrates and fish. And we also grow some of our animals as well. So I'll talk about all of that throughout the tour. But for now, we'll go and check out our first stop. We are going to start here and talk a little bit about life support, because water obviously is very important to our aquarium. And we're very lucky here because we can actually pump water directly in from the bay. We do run it through filters, but lots of other aquariums actually have to buy salt and make their own salt water. So we're really lucky that we can use this nice clean water from the bay. What we do is we pump in raw seawater and we store it in the north end of our parking lot in a large storage pool. From there, we actually send it through quite a few different filters to help clean it up. So we don't add any chemicals. Everything we use is natural filtration. So for example, behind me, you'll see these really large filters. These are called sand filters. When the water runs through the sand, it actually just cleans up a lot of the particulates. If you've ever been surfing or swimming in the water here in Oregon, you notice it's usually a little bit murkier than it is at the aquarium and kind of green. So all the filters help clean it up and make it really clear for our guests and for our animals as well. Some other filters that we use ozone, which actually zaps the water, so it helps clean up any of that particulate matter that might make the water a little bit green or murky. We also use biofilters, so basically we use good bacteria to clean up the bad bacteria. So after we use the water, we actually will send it back through the filters and then send that out to the bay cleaner than it was when it came in. So it's really nice, so we can use that water, can use it, and send it back out cleaner. Now we're going to talk briefly about our pinniped collection, and that involves California sea lions and harbor seals. So you can see behind me a picture of a lot of the animals that we have. We have 6 harbor seals, and we have 2 California sea lions currently. These animals, it's kind of fun to tell their story. They're all here, like I said before, because they needed a home. We do have a couple younger animals. Catalina and Rosa, if you come to see them, are 2 of the young sea lions, and they were born in 2013 and 14. They were actually malnourished pups and were taken to a rehab facility, then they needed a home. So now they're happy and healthy here. So a lot of them are injured or from another facility, and they tend to live a lot longer in human care. So animals like a seal, for example, usually lives to be about 20 to 25 out in the ocean. But here we have a seal named Skinny who just turned 45 this summer, and she gets really great care. She's in very good health. And that's mainly because our staff works so closely with them. They build up a lot of trust with the animal, and they're able to do a lot of preventative husbandry behaviors. So they can actually work with the animals, give them eye drops if they need it, get really close and kind of hands-on with them. So it's really important for the trainers to build up that trust. Our trainers, when they're working with the animals, use positive reinforcement. So we don't force the animals to do anything. Basically, positive reinforcement means you ask for a certain behavior, and if you get it from the animal, then they get a yummy treat in return. And most of the training that we do with them is to get them ready for a vet visit. So these husbandry behaviors are really, really important. The animals have a really good relationship with their trainers, the staff that works with them every day. They may be a little more nervous when they're visited by a vet. So our staff tries to train them as much as possible to be ready for that visit. So they'll do pretend blood draws, so they actually lay the animals down and kind of poke them with a blunt needle just to get them used to that feeling. So when the vets come in to actually draw blood, it's a lot less stressful for the animal. Their health and welfare is the most important aspect that goes into training. And some of the training behaviors that they work with the animals on is just for fun for the animal. For example, we'll give an animal a paintbrush, a modified paintbrush, and a piece of canvas and see what kind of artwork they can create. We'll also do things like freeze little popsicles with food in them to give them to the animals, just encourage them to use a little bit more natural behavior as well. But those behaviors are really, really important, even the fun ones, just to kind of stimulate the animals' minds and bodies. We are currently behind our sea otter holding, and you might see behind my shoulder there's an otter named Schuster. So we actually have 3 sea otters, they're all males, and they're all here because they needed a home. So 2 of them are actually orphaned pups, and then Schuster actually came in, he had a bite that they suspect may have been from a shark. So he had to recover from that. So we have 3 boys that live together, and Schuster currently is in one of our med pools behind me. This pool actually connects to the main exhibit out front. So when you come to see the otters up there, this is an area where we can bring back otters for several reasons. One, if we needed one to give one a little bit extra attention or to separate them from the other 2, we could bring them back to this pool. It's also a good place to bring them in the morning when we're cleaning up the front of the exhibit. You may know that otters are kind of big eaters. They don't have any blubber like a seal or sea lion. So they actually get fed 4 to 6 times a day and eat about 25% of their body weight every single day. So that really fast metabolism and really, really thick fur helps keep them warm. So we are an AZA facility, which means we're certified by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. That means we're held to a really high standard for both animal care and welfare. In our kitchen, our animals are fed restaurant quality seafood, and the mammal team is actually regulated by the USDA. So this kitchen has to be as clean as a restaurant kitchen. So every time they do any kind of food prep or anything in here, they actually bleach all the floors and the light switches and the doorknobs to make sure everything is really, really clean. They're also very particular to the food that they feed the animals. They've actually come back here and shadowed the mammal team before, and they look at every single fish. They sort every single fish before they give it to one of the marine mammals. If it's missing some scales or has a little cut or something on it, they won't even feed it to the mammals. They'll discard that. They're still restaurant quality fish, but sometimes those will actually get sent over to the shark side, and they'll prep that food to be fed to the sharks and the other animals in the passages of the deep. Yeah, nothing goes to waste. And another thing that's really important for all of our animals is enrichment. And especially the marine mammals, they have lots of, basically it looks like toys. The goal behind enrichment is to stimulate our animals both physically and mentally. So these animals don't have to go out in the wild and hunt or avoid predators, so we try to change up their habitat a little bit just to give them something interesting to interact with. That could involve freezing food, for example, to encourage our animals to use their brain and try to figure out how to get to their food. We give some animals puzzles, or we might just put a new ball in with a certain scent on it to see how the animals interact with it. Doesn't always have to involve food, but our goal is to add something new every day for these animals, just to change it up for them and give them something kind of novel to interact with. A really important aspect of enrichment is choice, which is why we have such a variety of different enrichment items that are available to offer the animals. So I am standing outside of our Passages of the Deep exhibit. There's kind of an interesting history to this building. Initially, it was built for a movie star that we had here for about 2 years, from 1996 to 1998. We actually had the orca from the Free Willy movies. His name was Keiko, and he was here before he got released to Iceland. So he was actually living down in Mexico. Originally, he was from Iceland, so he was going to be returned back to really cold water. So they wanted to bring him to a space where he could get acclimated to the colder water again. So the foundation that wanted to release him actually asked us to build a 2.1 million gallon pool here. Now it currently has a roof. Then it did not. It was just a big open pool for Keiko. And the goal is to give him more food so he could get a little bit bigger, and then also do some training with him so he'd be able to get moved to a sea pen in Iceland before he was eventually released. I'm standing next to a whalebone. You might be wondering why I'm doing that. But this was enrichment for some of our sharks. So sharks, the broad-nosed seven-gills in particular, are scavengers, and they'll eat a whale carcass if it sinks to the bottom of the ocean. So we tried to put in a whalebone to see if that would be interesting to the sharks. They weren't super interested because there was no meat on it. So we put it up here, and now mainly it's here so guests can see it when they're coming in to check out the passages of the deep. So we're going to go in and take a look inside. So here we are inside of our Passages of the Deep exhibit. The idea behind this exhibit was to give the visitor the experience of kind of walking underwater, right from shore all the way out to the open sea. We have 3 different pools in here that all have a different theme. So Orford Reef is the one I'm standing at currently. This one is actually supposed to be the nearshore habitat. So you see rocky pillars and kelp forest and a lot of rockfish. A lot of these species live in this area. This is a really neat exhibit as well because it's actually designed to look like an actual place off the Oregon coast. There's actually a marine reserve called Redfish Rocks down near Port Orford, and Orford Reef was designed to look like that space. So it's kind of interesting. You'll see a lot of rockfish and wolf eels and different animals down in that area as well. Our middle pool is called Halibut Flats, so that would be if you continue it out past the rocky coast, you'd get out into sandy bottom. You'll see a lot more flatfish like halibut that blend in really well to the seafloor. In our exhibit, we also have a shipwreck to give them a little bit of more structure to kind of hang out in. And then if you keep walking further, you get to our open sea exhibit, which features all of our sharks and schooling fish. That's supposed to replicate just in open sea habitats. We have 4 species of sharks, the largest of which are the broad-nosed 7 gills. We also have a little bit smaller species called a taupe shark. We have leopard sharks, which are the pretty sharks with all the spots. And we have really small sharks called spiny dogfish as well. And the rays are related to sharks. We have a lot of bat rays that kind of fly around the exhibit as well. We have about 70 to 80 sharks currently. You wouldn't see that many if you went swimming out in the ocean, so don't get nervous. But these are all animals you could see right off the coast here. So this exhibit also features large groups of schooling fish like anchovies. And don't worry, they're not at risk being eaten by their shark neighbors. Sharks rarely eat the other fish in the exhibit, and it's mainly because out in the ocean, sharks will eat weak or injured fish. That's more their role is to keep those populations healthy. It would actually take them more energy probably to chase an anchovy than they would actually get from eating it. And we actually feed the sharks, so they know where their food is going to come from. So we feed the animals up here in 2 different ways. So the sharks get fed with a method of feeding called a target feed. And basically what we do is we put a target in the water. For the large sharks, it looks like a black and white checkerboard. We can actually place that in the water, and the large sharks know, like the 7 gills, if they want to get some food, they need to swim up to that target. And when they get close, our aquarist will actually put a fish in the water in front of them, and they take it right off of a hole. A target feed enables us to know how much each shark is eating, so we'll keep track of that. So if a shark, for example, one of our large 7 gills wouldn't eat for a while, we might know that he's not feeling well and then call the vets in to do a checkup. It would take a really long time to feed all of the fish that way, especially all the anchovies. So the other method of feeding that we use is called a broadcast feed. And basically what that entails is cutting up seafood into really small pieces, and then we basically just kind of throw the fish out there. Connected to the other pools here in the Passages of the Deep, we have 2 med pools. And these basically serve as areas where we can take out animals if they need a little bit extra attention. We could treat them and put them in this pool to recover before we send them back into the main exhibit. It also allows us to acclimate new animals to the water before we put them out in the main exhibit as well. The large med pool is also where we feed our bat rays. So the bat rays eat clams, and they can be a little bit messy eaters. So we actually encourage the rays to come into the med pool so it's a little bit easier for us to clean up. And the way we do that is we actually shine a red light at the gate. So we can open up a gate, and the bat rays know when the red light is on that their food is ready. We are currently behind the Seabird Aviary and about to go enter into bird holding. Bird holding is kind of a neat area to bring guests because you'll see some animals you don't necessarily get to see on exhibit. All the birds that we have here behind the scenes are non-releasable. So you might see over my shoulder there's 2 pelicans. We actually have 3 pelicans here that all have some sort of injury that didn't allow them to be released into the wild. You may have seen Jojo if you've come previously and saw one of our pelican walks. Jojo is actually trained to come out in front of guests and do a short training session. Jojo is actually what we consider an animal ambassador, and she allows guests to learn a little bit more about her species, and hopefully they can help out her wild counterparts. Not all of our animals have physical injuries. Some of them are actually imprinted on people. So Gus, the western gull behind me, was taken to a rehab facility when he was young, and he's totally physically healthy, but he spent too much time around people and got too reliant on them. So he was not able to release, and that's why we have him here. Gus actually seems to prefer the company to people than birds. We also have two common murres named Marvin and Quina. Murres are seabirds that we see really commonly along the coast here in the summer when they're breeding. They're also one of the species that we have out in our Seabird Aviary. Marvin came to us as an imprinted bird as well. Marvin lives with another bird named Quina, another murre, who was actually hatched in our exhibit and hand-raised to be Marvin's companion. To my right here, we also have what we call birdie condos. These are little units, individual units that we can put birds in from our Seabird Aviary that may need a little bit of help. Basically, the birdie condos are little pools of water with grass on either side, and it's this kind of nice, quiet place to allow birds to recover until they can go back out into the Seabird Aviary. We are now in our jelly holding room. This is actually an area where we can grow our own jellyfish. The reason we do that is sometimes they're kind of difficult to find out in the ocean. So you usually see them, they travel along the currents, and if we need some, we're not always sure we're going to be able to find some. We and a lot of other aquariums grow our own moon jellies. The way we do it is pretty interesting. So jellies have a really interesting life cycle. They start out as little larvae that are kind of free swimming, but eventually they go into a phase called a polyp phase. So they'll attach, kind of like a sea anemone will, to the seafloor or to a hard surface. When the conditions are right, these polyps will start to make little clones of themselves, and they stack up on top. And then eventually they actually bud off these little jelly clones called a phyra, and they'll actually go swimming until they get big enough, and then they actually will metamorphose into the adult medusa phase. So it's a very simple animal without a brain, but with a really, really interesting life cycle. Now here is where we actually culture the jellies. So in some of these little fish tanks you see down here, we have jelly polyps. These are the ones we're trying to feed and keep happy. Some of these we've actually had for a long time. We've had some of these in here since 2006. So if you keep them happy, they kind of work like a little jelly factory. And then from time to time, they'll make little clones of themselves, and we can add these animals to our population. They're really, really small when they're first born. So what our aquarists will do is actually use an eyedropper, and they suck out each individual little jelly, and we start to move them along these tanks up at the top. So I always kind of liken it to school. When they're really small, they go to kindergarten, and then the next tank would be first grade, second grade, third grade. Eventually they go down to the bigger tank below. That's like middle school, and then eventually they go out to high school and college to go and exhibit. The tank in front of me is our jelly touch pool area. So normally if we're doing a jelly touch encounter, this is where you can come back and meet our adult jellies. So even though we culture our own moon jellies, we do collect them from time to time. That way we can actually add genetic diversity to the population. Here in the jelly holding room, we culture brine shrimp, which is a food that we feed to a lot of our filter feeders, like anemones and a lot of our jellies. If you ever had sea monkeys growing up, those are just brine shrimp with fancy marketing. And then we usually feed most of the animals 2-day-old brine shrimp, so they're still really small when we feed them to our filter feeders. And once again, my name is Jeff Harms, the education manager here at the aquarium, and thanks so much for joining us on our behind-the-scenes tour.